The dashboard clock blinked 3:17 in the morning when Danny Rodriguez realized he had no idea where he was. Behind him, in the custom interior of the 45-foot tour bus, rock legend Ozzy Osbourne slept soundly in his private cabin, completely unaware that his driver had just taken them somewhere that didn't exist on any GPS system, any map, or any known highway in North America. Danny had been driving tour buses for 17 years. He'd navigated ice storms in Montana, flash floods in Arizona, and once even a small earthquake in California without breaking a sweat. But this was different. The road beneath the massive wheels had changed texture about 20 miles back, shifting from smooth asphalt to something that felt almost alive, almost breathing under the weight of the vehicle. The fog had rolled in around mile marker 213 on Interstate 40, somewhere between Albuquerque and Amarillo. Standard desert fog, Danny had thought at first. Nothing unusual about that, but then the fog had gotten thicker and thicker, until it pressed against the windshield like a living creature, swirling in patterns that seemed almost intentional, almost intelligent. The GPS had died first. Just flickered out, displaying nothing but static and a message Danny had never seen before. Location undefined. Then his phone lost signal. Then the radio turned to pure white noise, a hissing that sounded disturbingly like whispers if you listened too closely, which Danny tried very hard not to do. He should have stopped. Should have pulled over and waited for dawn, but something kept his foot on the accelerator, kept the bus moving forward through the impossible fog. Because stopping felt wrong in a way he couldn't explain. Stopping felt like it might be the worst decision he could possibly make. The road began to curve in ways that Interstate 40 never curved. Danny knew every mile of this route. He'd driven it 60, maybe 70 times over the years. There was no section where the highway corkscrewed like this, where it dipped and rose like a roller coaster, where the yellow dividing lines seemed to glow with their own internal light. In the back of the bus, Ozzy stirred but didn't wake. The touring crew, 3 roadies, a sound engineer, and Ozzy's personal assistant all slept through whatever this was, whatever this had become. Danny's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. His heart hammered against his ribs like it was trying to escape. Every instinct screamed at him to wake someone up, to get help, to not face this alone, but his voice wouldn't work. When he tried to call out, nothing emerged but a dry rasp that died in his throat. The fog began to clear at 3:42. Danny knew the exact time because he was watching the dashboard clock obsessively now, counting every minute, every second, using the passage of time as proof that reality still functioned normally, that he hadn't somehow driven into a place where the rules had changed. What emerged from the fog made Danny's foot ease off the accelerator, despite his earlier conviction that stopping was wrong. Because ahead of them, glowing with a soft purple luminescence that had no earthly source, was a town. Not just any town, a town that looked like it had been pulled from the 1950s and then twisted by someone with a deeply unsettling imagination. The buildings stood at angles that hurt to look at directly. The streetlights burned with colors Danny had no names for. And in the center of everything, dominating the skyline like a monument to madness, was a concert venue. The marquee blazed with lights that flickered and danced. Tonight only, Ozzy Osbourne, the show that never ends. Danny's hands trembled. He hadn't booked any shows in places he didn't recognize. Ozzy's tour manager, Marcus Chen, handled all the routing, all the venues. Marcus was meticulous, almost obsessive about documentation. There was no way he would have scheduled a show in a town that didn't exist. The bus rolled forward of its own accord. Danny's foot wasn't on the gas, but the vehicle moved anyway, drawn toward the venue like iron to a magnet. The streets were empty. No cars, no people, just those impossible buildings with their wrong angles and that venue growing larger and larger as they approached. Danny could see details now. The concert hall looked old, like something from the golden age of rock and roll, but wrong. The architecture shifted when he wasn't looking directly at it. Windows appeared and disappeared. The marquee changed messages. They've been waiting for you. And then, the audience never leaves. And then, welcome home, Prince of Darkness. That last one sent ice water through Danny's veins. Nobody knew they were coming. This tour bus wasn't even supposed to exist on anyone's radar right now. They were just traveling between shows, taking the boring overnight haul that dozens of bands made every week. The bus stopped on its own. parking perfectly in front of the venue's main entrance. The air brakes hissed, and in the sudden silence that followed, Danny could hear something that made his skin crawl. Music, coming from inside the building. A rock song he'd never heard before. Playing to a crowd he couldn't see but could definitely hear cheering, screaming, chanting. Behind him, a door opened. Footsteps. Then Ozzy's distinctively gravelly voice, thick with sleep. "Where are we then?" "This isn't Amarillo." Danny turned to face him, and the words tumbled out in a panicked rush. "I don't know. I swear I don't know. We were on the interstate and then the fog came and the GPS died and now we're here, and there's a concert hall with your name on it, but this place isn't real. It can't be real." Ozzy shuffled forward, wearing his trademark dark glasses even at this ungodly hour, his distinctive hair perfectly disheveled. He peered through the windshield at the glowing marquee and the impossible venue. For a long moment he was silent. Then he let out a low whistle. "Well," he said, his voice carrying that strange mixture of bewilderment and acceptance that had gotten him through decades of bizarre experiences. "That's bloody weird, isn't it?" The understatement of the century, Danny thought. "Should I wake the others?" Danny asked. His voice still shook. Ozzy considered this, then shook his head. "Let them sleep. No point in everyone being terrified." He moved to the front of the bus, standing beside Danny, both of them staring at the venue. "How long's this thing been showing my name?" "Since we arrived. Maybe 5 minutes, and the town appeared out of the fog. I've driven this route dozens of times. There's nothing here. There should be nothing here but desert." Ozzy nodded slowly, processing this information with the calm of someone who'd seen enough impossible things in his life that one more barely registered. "You know what the really strange bit is?" "What?" "I can hear them. The crowd." "Can you hear them?" Danny nodded. "They sound excited. They sound like they've been waiting a very long time." Ozzy moved toward the bus door. "Wait, what are you doing?" Danny's voice jumped an octave. "Going to have a look, obviously. Can't just sit here all night. You can't go out there. We don't know what this place is." Ozzy paused at the door controls, his hand hovering over the button that would open them to whatever waited outside. "Danny, my friend, I've bitten the heads off bats, been accused of trying to kill the president's wife, and survived more drugs than should be humanly possible. I'm curious about what's weird enough to drag me to a place that doesn't exist." The logic was deeply flawed, but it was also very Ozzy. Danny found himself unable to argue. The doors hissed open. The night air that flooded in wasn't cold or hot. It was perfectly neutral, perfectly still, and it smelled faintly of electricity and old vinyl records. The music from inside the venue grew louder, and now Danny could make out the song. It was heavy, dark, driving, everything an Ozzy song should be. But he'd never heard it before, and he'd heard every Ozzy song ever recorded. Ozzy stepped down from the bus, his boots hitting the pavement with a sound that echoed wrong, lasting too long. Danny grabbed the fire extinguisher from beside his seat, the only weapon-like object within reach, and followed. The venue's entrance stood open, double doors propped wide by nothing visible. Light spilled out, purple and gold in colors that shouldn't exist. The music washed over them, and with it came the sound of the crowd. Thousands of voices raised in worship, in ecstasy, in something that transcended normal concert enthusiasm. "After you?" Ozzy gestured toward the entrance with exaggerated politeness. "You cannot be serious. Come on, Danny, where's your sense of adventure? I left it back in reality where it belongs." But they walked forward together anyway, drawn by curiosity and compulsion in equal measure. The marquee directly above them buzzed and flickered, the message changing one final time. The show must go on, forever. The lobby was Art Deco nightmare. Beautiful and terrible in equal measure, with geometric patterns that moved when Danny looked away, and chandeliers that hung upside down, their crystals defying gravity. Concert posters lined the walls, shows that never happened, dates that didn't exist, venues in cities that had no names. The music was deafening now. The roar of the crowd was physical, pressing against them. And ahead, through another set of doors, they could see the stage. "It's packed," Ozzy said, his voice carrying wonder. "Absolutely rammed." Danny looked through the gap in the doors and felt his mind rebel against what he saw. The venue was impossible. It stretched back farther than the building's exterior could contain. Thousands upon thousands of people packed into a space that seemed to expand infinitely the longer you looked at it. The stage blazed with lighting that moved in patterns no real concert lighting could achieve, and on that stage stood someone who looked exactly like Ozzy Osbourne, performing with a band Danny didn't recognize, playing songs that didn't exist, to a crowd that shouldn't be there. The real Ozzy stood beside Danny, also staring at his doppelganger on stage. Well, that's me then. From when I was younger, he was right. The Ozzy on stage looked like he did in the early 80s, wild-eyed, energetic, commanding the stage with primal charisma. But something was wrong with him. His movements were too fluid, too perfect. His voice hit notes that no human voice should reach, and when he moved, he left trails of shadow behind him, as if he wasn't quite solid. "How is this possible?" Danny whispered. "I don't think possible applies here, mate." The younger Ozzy on stage suddenly stopped mid-song. The entire band stopped. The crowd went silent. And in that terrible silence, the figure on stage turned to look directly at them through the doors. Directly at the real Ozzy standing in the lobby, his smile was too wide. His eyes glowed with that same purple luminescence as the town's streetlights. When he spoke, his voice came from everywhere at once, reverberating through the building, through their bones, through reality itself. "Finally, you're here. We've been playing your songs for decades, waiting for you to arrive. The real you. The genuine article. Because a performance needs an audience, but it also needs truth. And we've been nothing but echoes for so very long." Ozzy stepped forward, and Danny grabbed his arm, trying to hold him back. But Ozzy shrugged him off gently. "It's all right, Danny, I think I understand now." "Understand what?" "This is where the music goes. When we play it, when we record it, when we put it out into the world. It has to go somewhere. It has to live somewhere. And this is where it lives. This is where all the performances that could have been, should have been, might have been, this is where they exist." The figure on stage nodded, his too wide smile unwavering. "Every song you never recorded, every show you never played, every version of yourself that could have existed. We're all here, all of us, living in the places between places, performing for the people who love the music so much they dreamed themselves here." Danny looked at the crowd again, really looked, and felt his stomach drop. They were transparent, barely there, like projections. Ghosts of fans or echoes of possibility. And they were all staring with desperate, hungry eyes. "What do you want?" Ozzy asked, his voice steady despite everything. "To be real. Just for one night. One genuine performance. You here? Actually here. Making the music live instead of being a recording we repeat endlessly. Give us that and we'll let you go. We'll put you back on that highway like nothing happened. And if I refuse?" The shadow Ozzy's smile finally faded. "Then you stay. Like we stayed. Forever performing, forever trapped, forever feeding the hunger of the in-between." The crowd stirred, a susurrus of whispered pleas and hungry desires washing over them. Danny felt it pulling at him, trying to drag him down into the mass of almost real people. Ozzy stood silent for a long moment, considering. Then he did something Danny didn't expect. He laughed. That distinctive, slightly manic Ozzy laugh that had become iconic over the decades. "You want a real performance? You want genuine? All right then. But I do this my way. With my band. My crew, my terms. And when it's done, you keep your word. Everyone gets to leave." The shadow Ozzy flickered, seeming uncertain for the first time. "Your band is sleeping. Your crew is, then wake them up. If you want real, you get all of it. The setup, the sound check, the pre-show chaos, everything. Because that's what makes a show genuine. Not just me standing on a stage pretending." A long pause. Then the shadow Ozzy nodded. "Done," reality rippled. Danny felt a wave of displacement wash over him, and suddenly he was back on the bus. The crew was waking up, confused, asking questions. Ozzy was explaining calmly that they had an unexpected show to play. And yes, it was weird, and yes, it was probably supernatural. But they were doing it anyway because the alternative was worse. Marcus Chen, the tour manager, emerged from his cabin looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. "This is insane. We can't do a show in a place that doesn't exist." "We can and we will," Ozzy said firmly. "Trust me on this one, Marcus. It's important." And somehow, impossibly, the crew fell into their familiar routines. Roadies unloaded equipment. The sound engineers started setting up microphones and speakers. They moved with purpose toward the venue, toward the impossible stage, as if doing a show in a nightmare town was just another Tuesday. Danny helped where he could. hauling cables and equipment cases, moving in a daze through preparations that felt both completely normal and absolutely insane. The shadow band had vanished from the stage, leaving it empty for the real thing. The transparent crowd waited with infinite patience. The sound check was surreal. The venue's acoustics were perfect, too perfect. Every note rang with crystalline clarity. Every adjustment took effect immediately. The sound engineer kept muttering about how this was impossible. How rooms didn't work this way, but he kept working anyway. Ozzy stood center stage, testing microphones, running through vocal warm-ups, and Danny could see him transforming. This was what he did. This was who he was. Even here, even now, even in a place that shouldn't exist, performing was performing. And Ozzy Osbourne knew how to perform. The crew finished their setup. The lights came up, real lights this time, controlled by their real lighting tech. The band took their positions. Actual musicians, actual human beings, actual reality imposed on this unreal space. Ozzy stepped to the microphone. The crowd of almost real people leaned forward in anticipation. And Danny, watching from the wings with his heart in his throat, realized he was about to witness something that no one else would ever believe happened. All right then. Ozzy's voice boomed through the perfect speakers into the impossible venue. You wanted real? Here's real. This is for everyone who ever got lost on the way to somewhere else. This is for everyone stuck between places. This is for everyone who loves the music so much they dream themselves into existence just to hear it one more time. The first chord struck like lightning. The band launched into the opening of a classic and the crowd erupted. But this time their cheers sounded more solid, more present. The music was doing something, Danny realized. It was making them real, at least temporarily, at least for the duration of this impossible show. Ozzy performed like his life depended on it, because maybe it did. He gave everything to that crowd of ghosts and echoes, pouring decades of experience and passion into every note, every word. The band matched him, playing with intensity that bordered on transcendent. This wasn't just a concert. This was a ritual, a summoning, a making real of things that had only existed as potential. Song after song, the set list unwound. The crowd sang along, their voices growing stronger with each chorus. By the third song, they looked almost human. By the fifth, they were jumping, dancing, living in ways that beings made of possibility shouldn't be able to. And through it all, Danny watched from the wings, holding his fire extinguisher like a talisman, wondering if any of this was actually happening, or if he'd fallen asleep at the wheel, and this was all some elaborate dying dream. But it felt real. The sweat on Ozzy's face was real. The calluses on the guitarist's fingers were real. The exhaustion creeping into everyone as they pushed through song after song was real. Whatever else this place was, the performance was genuine. An hour passed, then 2. The set extended far beyond what they'd normally play, but Ozzy kept going, kept giving, kept pouring himself into the music. The crowd absorbed every note like they were starving for it, which Danny supposed they were. Starving for something real in their echo existence. Finally, after the last encore, after the final note faded into the perfect acoustics of the impossible venue, Ozzy stepped back from the microphone. The crowd stood silent, tears streaming down faces that looked almost solid now, almost real. The shadow Ozzy appeared beside the stage, more substantial than before, but still wrong, still not quite there. You kept your word. That was real. That was genuine. Thank you. You're welcome, Ozzy said, breathing hard, soaked with sweat. Now you keep yours, the shadow Ozzy nodded. You'll forget this by morning. All of you, it'll be just a strange dream, a confused memory of driving through fog. That's how it has to be. The world isn't ready to know about places like this. Probably for the best, Ozzy agreed. Danny wanted to protest, wanted to say he'd never forget this. But even as the thought formed, he felt it slipping away like water through fingers. The venue began to fade. The crowd waved goodbye, their newly solid forms already becoming transparent again. The impossible town outside started to dissolve back into fog. The last thing Danny saw was the shadow Ozzy raising one hand in farewell. And then everything was white, everything was fog. Everything was the sound of wheels on asphalt. Danny woke with a start, his hands on the steering wheel, the bus rolling smoothly down Interstate 40. Dawn painted the desert sky in shades of orange and pink. The GPS worked perfectly, showing them right on schedule, approaching Amarillo exactly when they were supposed to arrive. Behind him, the crew was stirring, waking up naturally. No one seemed confused or alarmed. Everything felt normal. But on the dashboard, next to the now functioning GPS, was a concert ticket. Danny picked it up with trembling hands. It was for a venue that didn't exist, in a town that wasn't on any map, dated for the night they'd just lived through. The ticket was worn, used, torn at the corner where it had been collected, and written on the back in handwriting that looked disturbingly like his own, "The show that never ends. Thank you for making it real." Danny tucked the ticket into his wallet, between his license and a photo of his daughter. He didn't understand what had happened, and maybe he never would. But as the sun rose higher and Amarillo grew closer on the horizon, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Somewhere out there, in the places between places, music lived on in ways that defied understanding. And for one night, for one impossible show, they'd fed the hungry ghosts of possibility and made something real from nothing at all. Ozzy emerged from his cabin an hour later, looking tired but content. He stretched, yawned, and shuffled up to the front of the bus. "Weird dreams last night," he said conversationally. "Thought we played a show in a town that didn't exist." Danny's hand went to his wallet, feeling the ticket hidden there. "Yeah," he said carefully. "That is weird. Probably just the road playing tricks on my mind." Ozzy settled into the passenger seat, staring out at the endless Texas highway. "You know what the strangest part was, though?" "What's that?" "In the dream, it felt like the most important show I'd ever played. Like somehow, it mattered more than all the stadium tours and festival headlining gigs. Isn't that mad?" Danny thought about the crowd of almost real people, desperate for something genuine. He thought about the shadow Ozzy echoing through eternity. He thought about how music had to go somewhere, had to live somewhere, and how maybe that somewhere needed feeding once in a while. "Not mad at all," Danny said quietly. "Sometimes the shows nobody sees are the ones that matter most." Ozzy nodded, seeming satisfied with that answer. He put his sunglasses on despite the early hour and settled in to watch the desert roll by. And Danny drove on, the concert ticket burning like a secret in his wallet. The only proof that impossible things sometimes happened on the roads between somewhere and nowhere, in the places where the map had nothing to say and reality got thin enough for other things to bleed through. The tour bus rolled into Amarillo exactly on schedule. Nobody mentioned the fog. Nobody talked about lost time. The GPS showed their route as a perfectly straight line along Interstate 40, with no detours, no stops, no excursions into towns that didn't exist. But that night, in a cheap motel room while the rest of the crew celebrated being back on schedule, Danny pulled out the ticket and stared at it under the harsh fluorescent lights. The ink hadn't faded. The torn corner was still torn. The message on the back remained, stark and undeniable. He thought about burning it, about destroying the only evidence. But he couldn't bring himself to do it. Because if he destroyed the ticket, if he erased the proof, then maybe it really would become just a dream. Just a confusion, just a driver's hallucination after too many hours on the road. And something in Danny rebelled against that. Some part of him needed this to be real, needed to believe that there were places in the world, or outside the world, where music lived on beyond recordings and memories. Where performances that never happened could still echo through eternity. Where love of art could literally dream people into existence. He put the ticket back in his wallet. He didn't tell anyone about it. Not his wife, not his kids, not his fellow drivers during late-night truck stop conversations about the weirdest things they'd ever seen on the road. It remained his secret, his proof. His small rebellion against a world that insisted everything made sense, everything had explanations, everything fit neatly into boxes labeled real and not real. Because Danny Rodriguez, tour bus driver for 17 years, knew better now. He knew that sometimes the map was wrong. Sometimes the GPS lied. Sometimes the road took you places that shouldn't exist. And you played shows for audiences made of dreams and desperation. And you made something impossible briefly, beautifully real. And if that made him crazy, if that made him delusional, so be it. At least it was an interesting delusion. At least it meant the world was bigger, stranger, and more full of wonder than anyone wanted to admit. The tour rolled on. Amarillo became Austin, became Houston, became a dozen other cities, all of them perfectly real, perfectly normal, perfectly mapped. But Danny drove differently now. He drove with awareness, with attention, watching for places where the fog got too thick, where the GPS glitched, where reality seemed negotiable. Because if it happened once, it could happen again. And next time, he wanted to be ready. Next time, He wanted to remember every detail, to hold on to every moment, to refuse the forgetting that the Shadow Ozzy promised. Next time, he would make sure someone else saw the ticket. Someone else remembered. Someone else knew that out there, in the spaces between spaces, music lived on forever, feeding the hungry, sustaining the possible, making echoes into something approaching life. Ozzy never mentioned his weird dream again, but sometimes when they were driving late at night, Danny would catch him staring out the window with an odd expression, like he was looking for something he couldn't quite name. Like some part of him remembered, even if his conscious mind had let it go. And Danny would smile to himself and keep driving. One hand on the wheel, one eye on the road, and his wallet pressed against his chest where his heart beat out a rhythm that sounded, if you listened closely enough, almost like a rock and roll song played in a venue that never existed for a crowd that shouldn't be real. The show that never ends, he thought. Thank you for making it real. And out there, somewhere in the fog and the spaces between, he liked to imagine they were still playing, still performing, still keeping the music alive in ways that defied everything anyone thought they knew about how the world worked. It was a comforting thought, an impossible thought, and maybe, just maybe, a true one.